Okay, hello everyone. Welcome. Let's allow our guests into the room. Welcome to our talk today. My name is Scott, coming to you from Tokyo, Japan. And tonight's topic is powerful poster presentations and slide talks. We hope this talk will be useful for you in your next presentation. And joining me, as always, is Dr. Gareth Dyke. Gareth, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Scott. How are you? Everything going well? Everything okay at your side?
Fantastic. It's a beautiful, crisp spring day here in Tokyo. I hope everyone's doing wonderfully well, no matter where you are. And speaking of where you are, let us know where in the world you're joining us from. And if you care to, let us know the kind of research that you're doing. We'd love to meet researchers from all around the world. So please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. Say
Absolutely.
hello.
Absolutely. The chat should be open. You should be able to let us know where you're from, like even a little bit about you, like what subject you're working on, for example, would be absolutely brilliant to learn more. Scott.
And Gareth, maybe some people are joining us for the first time. Maybe they want to know a little more about you. First of all, how are you today? And who are you, Gareth?
Oh, I'm doing great today. Yeah, no problem. I'm very happy to see our colleagues, many of the same friendly faces that join us with all of these Bentham Science webinar events, as well as other colleagues joining us perhaps for the first time. I used to work as a researcher for 15 years. I was a full-time academic researcher, publishing lots of papers. Now Scott and I work together providing training for researchers around the world, helping colleagues understand the writing and publishing process. I see India, South Africa, Jordan, Cameroon, Malaysia. Fantastic. Really good to see you, everybody.
Yeah, it's great to see researchers and students joining us from all around the world. And we do get quite a mix of people at these events. We get everyone from pre-PhDs and masters to postdocs to experienced researchers, lab leaders, librarians, all kinds of wonderful folks joining these events with us. So thank you for making time, everyone, to join us today.
Absolutely brilliant. We're going to be talking, as Scott mentioned, about powerful poster presentations and slide talks. Throughout the event, you can put your comments into either the chat box or the Zoom Q&A. There'll be special gifts for everybody at the end of our event today. Right, Scott? What happens after each of our webinar events?
Looks like we lost you for a moment there, Gareth. Welcome back.
Oh, apologies, everybody. I just kept talking. Hopefully that was, you know, something happened there. But I was just saying at the end of each event, after each of our webinar events, a number of things happen, don't they, Scott, in the days following these events?
Right, we'll send everyone a certificate of attendance for joining us today. Again, thank you for taking time. And we'll also send you a link to the full video recording with a transcript. And you can browse that as many times as you like. You can also share that with your colleagues or your co-authors or your laboratory colleagues or your students. If you're a professor, feel free to share this event with anyone who you think might find it interesting and useful. And I can see one of our guests is asking us to switch on or to allow the Mandarin subtitles. We did set that for Mandarin, so hopefully it's working for you. If it's not, we apologize. We'll see if we can look into that. And for everyone else joining us from around the world, thank you so much. It's great to see everyone joining us today. Gareth, Bentham Science Publishers is the sponsor of this event. As always, tell us a little bit about Bentham Science.
Fantastic publisher. We've worked for them for a number of years. This is a growth publisher with about 140, 150 journals in total, 116 traditional journals, so journals that can be published in for free or converted to full open access. Around 70 or so open access journals overall. Do have a look at Bentham as a place for your next publication, as well as more than 1,300 ebooks overall. So it's a great place, a great publisher, a great opportunity. If you haven't seen the Bentham portfolio, if you don't know about the Bentham portfolio, do have a look at benthamscience.com. And I'm seeing Jamie's asking about the recording. Scott, that's going to come in the next few days, right?
That's right. We'll send an email out tomorrow. It's 24 hours after the event finishes. We'll send you a link to the full recording so Jamie, you, and everyone else can review that as much as you like. And we'll also send out a certificate for everyone who joined us today. And I'll drop a link in the comments here to Bentham Science so you can explore Bentham's journals. And if you are a librarian joining us today for your institution, then you can get a free trial of Bentham's journals for your library completely free for 3 months. There's no strings, there's no stress. Just scan the QR code that you can see on the slide here and fill in a very short form, and the Bentham team will reach out to you and set you up with a 3 month trial for your institution for the full collection.
And the Mandarin subtitles should be working. I see that comment as well in the chat box. And it's great that you're all sharing like information about where you're from, also what you're working on. Dr. OK, you're from Earth. So are we all. We're all like citizens of Earth these days. Thank you so much for joining us. We're about to get started with our presentation this afternoon, this morning, this evening, right, Scott?
Yeah, we're just about to start here. And Gareth, we've got three main topics to cover today. As the title suggests, we're going to walk through the steps, or the stages at least, of preparing for a talk. We'll talk about planning your talk, making decisions about whether to attend or what kind of talk you're going to give. And then, Gareth, you're going to explain a little bit about preparing for a presentation and different ways that we can practice for a talk. And then finally, we're going to talk about actually the act of giving the talk and some tips and tricks for giving an effective talk, and also a little bit of networking, how you can make the most of your talks at conferences and make new connections for mentors, for peer reviewers, and to find collaborators for your research. So it should be an interesting talk today.
Hope for the best, hope for the best. Planning the talk, preparing and practicing the talk, and then presenting and networking. Those are our topics. Thank you, everybody, so much for joining us. Let's dive in, and Scott's going to jump in and out. We're going to talk about many of these topics together today, this evening, this morning, this afternoon. We're going to begin, though, as you would begin, thinking about giving a talk. What should you do first of all? And the first thing to do, of course, before you put your slides together, before you start to prepare your presentation, is of course to begin the planning process. And we started this off, right, Scott, by thinking about the different situations where young researchers especially might end up giving a talk, what kinds of situations they would be in to present about their research.
Right, and we'll do a poll in just a couple of minutes here, and we'll find out what kinds of presentations that you might have done, our guests today, just to gauge our guests and see what kind of experience you have.
So giving a talk, of course, extremely important part of your career progression. It's a necessary evil. And of course, as we'll talk about, everybody gets really, really nervous. Of course they do, about giving any kind of presentation, any kind of talk. But we thought, academic conferences, departmental meetings, informal presentations within your own research group might be the main ways that you would be disseminating and talking about your research as a researcher. Do let us know in the chat if there are other examples of talks that you've given recently, but it's really, really a great idea to do the best possible presentation that you can. You never know who's going to be in the audience. This is, of course, an important part of your career progression. And people, they really do, they form impressions really fast. So if you don't put the work in, if you don't do a good enough job at your presentation, be that a poster or a slide talk, as we're going to discuss in our event today, people might form impressions of you that are then hard to shift in the future. So it really is worth putting in the time, doing the best job that you can, and thinking about when to present. Should you do this, for example, before you've published a paper? Are you going to do that? If you do that, then you will need sometimes to declare to your target journal that you've talked about this research in a conference presentation, for example, not necessarily in a research group meeting or a department seminar, but if you're publishing on something that's been disseminated, maybe published as an abstract, you would need potentially to flag that to a journal. Most people, many people, talk about their research after publication. Check the conference guidelines. What kind of presentation are you going to do. And this is all an important part of the planning process. We're here, of course, to help you with that. You might be giving a poster presentation at a conference. We're going to talk about those in a moment. You might be giving an oral presentation, so standing up and actually talking about your research in front of a room full of peers, a room full of researchers, a room full of strangers at a conference. That's also really, really important. Something that we're not going to touch on so much today, but you might also, as part of the conference process, be publishing a conference paper. And if you'd like information about how to do that, do check out the Bentham Science YouTube channel, where we have lots of other content presented with our friends and colleagues at Bentham Science around writing and publishing in English, if English is not your native language. So you are going to talk about your research. It could be a poster, or it could be an oral platform presentation. And these events, these opportunities are networking opportunities. It's your chance as a researcher to ensure that people get to know about what you're doing. They get to know about your research. You will make, we hope, applying many of the tips and tricks that we have for you in this presentation today, the best possible impression. Remember, people form those impressions quickly, and then often they are difficult to change. So giving a good talk, being as effective as possible, is a great way to enhance your career, maybe get to that next career stage. And really, if it's not a talk at a conference, giving a poster, talking about your work in a graphical format is not a second best option. This is a fantastic way to network with other people at the meeting. It's a great way to get across your work, a way to articulate and effectively communicate what you're working on. So do have a think about doing this as well. Many people do tend to think that it's a bit of a second choice option at a conference, but absolutely not. We would not agree with that. This is a great way to get your research over to other academics in your field. So we're going to do a quick poll, right, Scott? See how we're doing so far?
Great. Let's see what kinds of presentations our guests have given in the past. I'll launch the poll here. So let us know what kinds of presentations you've given. Have you given poster presentations before, oral presentations? Have you given invited talks or keynote presentations, teaching or classroom-based presentations, or perhaps you've not yet given a research presentation? I apologize, this is not a multiple answer quiz. There's only one answer possible. But anyway, give us a choice and let us know which presentation experience you have the most in, whether it's poster talks, oral talks, and so on. Gareth, you've obviously given a lot of talks.
Yeah, I have, but I didn't used to. I used to find them extremely nerve-wracking experiences, and I still do. I don't know about you, Scott. It's still very nerve-wracking to give presentations to talk about your research, as you have done. Like, which of these is your answer, Scott? Which of these have you done most often over the course of your career?
That's a great question. And in my case, it would be teaching or classroom-based presentations. I'm in a lecture room right now here at the Faculty of Engineering. And I would say that it depends on the kind of presentation. I feel actually by now quite comfortable stepping up and giving a lecture, but something like a poster talk or a slide talk is still sometimes a little bit nerve-wracking. So it really depends on the presentation type.
We're going to talk about this in a minute. We're going to talk about how you can overcome nerves, how you can prepare your presentation. But let's have a look at the poll. I mean, what do our guests today feel about this?
Great. And apologies for only giving you one choice on this quiz. I'm sure you have experience with multiple types of presentations. But anyway, the presentation that seems to be the most common is oral presentations with slides. We have 39% of our guests said that's the one they had the most experience with. Next was poster presentations at 34%. And next was teaching or classroom-based talks. Third was invited talks or keynotes, which makes sense because there are fewer of those going around. And then 4% of our guests today have not yet given a research talk. So hopefully there'll be something in our presentation today to help everyone who's joined us.
Absolutely. And the best time to start is right now, thinking about how you can put a talk together. There's not enough time. You really should be planning these kinds of things in advance. Don't do what I used to do and just show up at conferences and wing it. That's always a really, really bad strategy. Think about what you will be doing at your next conference. Will you be presenting a poster? Will you be just networking? And actually, in addition to presenting, really networking at conferences is the most important part. These are your opportunities to develop collaborations, to learn about future positions in your field, and to become known about in your research area as well. So we do encourage you, as you prepare to attend a conference, prepare to give a talk, prepare to think about talking at that next department seminar or even that informal research meeting. What's the purpose of your presentation? Who's going to be in the audience? International, local, mostly non-English native speakers, academics or non-academics. And so what style will you use? What kind of style are you going to use for your next presentation? These are key elements to think about before you put your presentation together, because at the end of the day, you've got to understand your audience. If you're talking to other academics about your research, you're going to use a different style and different content to if you're talking to the public or to students, for example. So we always ask first, who's going to be in the audience? Because this determines your style, determines your content. What sort of presentation are you going to create? And how much specific content, how much explanation of basics is going to be needed? And so things to do before you do attend a conference. This is really, really important. Planning is everything, as we've talked about already, especially if, like Scott and I, you're a bit introverted or a bit nervous about giving talks in the first place. So start planning as early as possible. Who's going to be there? When's the abstract deadline? What sessions will be at the conference? Schedule your time, prioritize, join social media activities, and prepare an abstract. Very important to get this together initially, especially if you're going to be talking about your poster at the meeting. And so before beginning to put your presentation together, let's have a think about what the one thing that we want our audience to walk away having learned, having thought about, that takeaway, that key message. What is the one thing in your talk that you are going to help people understand? The key takeaway, the key message. And the trick here is to keep it simple, effective slides, one message, and repeatedly emphasizing your take away, your take home message. So nobody who attends your talk is in any doubt about why they are there and what they're going to get from your presentation. And if you have a look quickly at this graphic, you'll see that giving a presentation about your research is actually quite different to writing a paper or putting together an article about your research. Why? Because a lot less information about the methods should go into your research presentation, more on the results and illustrations. As you can see here, people are much less interested in a presentation about how you did the work. They want to learn more about what you found. So when you're putting together a conference talk, let's do this 30-second quality check, asking yourself a few key questions. Can this abstract that I've submitted to this conference be understood on its own? Does it clearly state why the study was done? Is it clear what was done and how? Are the key findings stated concretely, easy to understand? And does the conclusion reflect the results without exaggeration? If the answer to any of these questions is no, as you put your abstract together for a conference, then let's revise it before submitting to that next meeting. And also, networking. The reason that you're going to a conference is to network, is to meet other people, other like-minded researchers, other colleagues who might be interested in working with you in the future. So do participate in event build-up. Find out what others are planning to do at the conference. Learn about fringe events and socials. Find out who's going to be there, when, and where. And you do this by engaging with the conference from early on in its evolution, understanding the website, the social media, the conference attendee list. Networking is absolutely key. So do that. And having said that, of course, very important as well to keep your eyes open for what we are terming now fake conferences. There are many conferences out there that are a little bit predatory. They're just interested in getting you to pay a registration fee, getting you to attend. They've got no true academic credentials. They only exist to try to cheat you out of your time, money, and research. And these days it can be quite difficult to spot the difference. Right, Scott? We see a lot of fake conferences popping up all the time in our day-to-day work, right?
It's getting more and more difficult to spot the difference. And that's why there's a valuable resource called thinkcheckattend.org. I've popped the link into the chat there. And there's a very simple questionnaire. Just go to that link there and follow the conference checker questionnaire. It asks you questions like, are you aware of the society or association that organizes this conference? Can you easily identify the venue where it's being held? Is it clear what fees are charged and so on? So just click through the questionnaire and hopefully you can spot a legitimate conference for your next conference.
Just like journals, if you heard us talk about journals in the past, you'll be aware that many open access journals are predatory. They're interested only in taking your money and not really interested in the publication process. Because there's a fee that's often paid for conferences, this is something that we also see quite often, unfortunately, in academia. So that was a little bit of information about planning your talk. Do give us questions. Do get engaged on the chat if you'd like to learn more, or we can give you more advice on any of these topics in our event today. We'll move on now and we'll talk about preparing and practicing. So we've planned the talk, very important. We've decided to attend the conference. We know what kind of thing we're going to do, a poster, a talk, or just be there to network, which is not all that common. Now we're going to prepare and practice the talk, the presentation, the poster before we actually do it. So this is the second part of our presentation today. Now, most conferences have poster presentations. They feature them. And these are where you make a graphical illustration of your research. You then go and talk about it at the session, at the poster session at the conference. You stand next to your conference poster and you interact with it as other researchers come by and talk to you. So what you've got to do is summarize your research, your information concisely. And you're going to use this as an opportunity to publicize your research and generate discussion. So ideally, as we'll talk about in a moment, you want to have text mixed with tables, graphs, pictures, and other visuals to capture people's attention about your research. And it's not a visual abstract of your work. What it is a networking and communication tool. People come up to your poster, they want to talk to you, they want to learn about what you're working on. This is a way to get other people interested in your research. So you can then take that to the next level at the conference by talking to them about you, about what you do, about who you work with. So what is a poster not? And I know Scott wants to say some things about this as well. It's not a place to just dump all of your data and technical lingo, right, Scott? This is a terrible example of a conference poster.
Right. It's not an info dump and it takes some discipline. Of course, we want to share everything. We worked hard. We want to share absolutely everything with people who visit our poster or listen to our slide talks, but it takes some control and discipline, as Gareth said earlier, to focus on the most meaningful information, to focus on that key message. It takes some time to trim everything down into a format people want to listen to and want to absorb. So I think take Garrett's tip from earlier, focus on your key message. And if your visual or your figure doesn't support that key message, then I think it's safe to crop that out.
Really important. I mean, you want only essential information and easy to understand visuals. So what we've done here is we've found you an example of a very difficult to understand visual, but it does come from a real conference poster. So again, putting this kind of presentation together, have a think before you start. What's the most important, interesting finding from my research project? Question one. What's the take home message? The key takeaway from your research. That's what you're going to be transmitting with your conference poster. And then question two, of course, is how can I visually share these findings with conference attendees? Am I going to use photos? Am I going to use images, graphs, charts, and so on? And don't forget this quote from Paul Arden: the more strikingly visual and eye-catching your poster presentation is, the more people will remember it, and more importantly, remember you, which is really, at the end of the day, what we are looking for in these kinds of formats. People are going to remember you. So we do recommend organizing your poster into a few key sections, as you can see here, and do expect a key reading order from your audience. People will expect to read from left to right and top to bottom. So as you put this together, and we're not designers, we're not going to talk to you about that in any detail today. Like, I'm sure you have friends, people at your university who are much better designers than we are, but do your sections flow logically? Is all of your text readable? Are the graphics high quality? Is the data understandable? And does key information stand out? And we're not going to read this out, but this is a list of pro tips for making a fantastic conference poster. Have a look at this, because these are common mistakes that people make, right, Scott? Things that are generally wrong with conference posters.
Right. We crammed a lot of information into this slide, so we won't bore you and read everything, but feel free to take a screenshot or review the video when we share the video with you tomorrow. But this is actually one of my favorite slides in the whole presentation. It's a lot of information here, but it's very condensed, and hopefully something here is helpful for you.
We've seen hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of conference presentations over the years. Have a look at this checklist, because it will help you to put together something that's going to work much better when you have to talk about your research. We don't have a lot of examples in this event today because we're not designers, but we do have some suggestions. There may be hundreds or thousands of posters at your next conference. You want to do something different, right, Scott? Something that stands out, that captures your audience's attention.
Yes, well, this poster certainly caught my eye. It's by a young and up and coming researcher called, what was his name? Dr. Gareth Dyke. I've never heard of him, but um, this is a really catchy poster. I love this design of yours, Gareth, and it really draws the reader in. Initially, I felt like some of the methods and other text was a bit small, but then I realized the purpose of this poster is to pull the viewer closer. So this poster does its job. It makes me want to step up and read in more detail. So in that sense, it's a great, catchy poster, and it really stands out at a conference, I'm sure.
How about these examples, though? Are these good examples or not so good examples?
Well, let's ask our guests today. On the slide, a couple slides back, we had a few rules on there. For example, organizing your work into columns and such. Let's see what our guests think. There's the poster on the left, the synergy one. Do you think just at first glance? Of course, we can't see the text on the posters, but if you were walking through a poster conference hall, it's just lined with dozens or even hundreds of posters, would you feel compelled to step closer and look at any of these posters? Do they catch your eye? I guess is the question here. For me, I think the synergy one on the left, the clever use of colors and the flow of the presentation makes me want to step up, maybe view that poster a bit more closely, and maybe ask a question to the presenter. Anyone else, our guests here, do any of these posters grab your eye and make you want to step up and read more?
We got some comments in the chat. People are saying it they're all a bit crowded. I agree with that. I think they're all a
Hmm.
bit kind of maybe with the exception of the synergy one, lots of information.
Yeah, indeed. I think they follow some of the principles we mentioned with having, 4 to 8 sections and, just a limited number of columns and so on. But they are a bit text heavy, a bit busy, and there's a lot of figures in the center one there. It's quite a lot of information there. Again, maybe if I were that researcher, I would maybe use a bit more discipline and, as Gareth said earlier, trim it down so that it's only reinforcing those key messages or key findings.
As we're trying to demonstrate, this is quite a distinct skill that you have to develop as a researcher, as distinct from writing an article or even giving a presentation. Here's a few more. Again, what do you think, everybody? What do you think, Scott? Which one of these is your favorite?
Interesting. So, obviously, this is as if we're standing, 5 to 10 meters away. You're spotting this poster from a distance. Do I want to step up and learn more? I would say the one in the center. I realize it's a bit less academic. It's more of an infographic style, but it certainly is catchy. There's a very creative
Hmm.
flow.
Yeah,
Um,
much more eye-catching. I think the one on the right, the adaptive grid one, that's just a bit boring. I'm not sure I'd want to read about.
It's very conventional. And of course, it's not my field. Particulate flow simulation certainly isn't my specialty, but even if it were, I'm not sure. And apologies if this is your poster, anyone joining us today. It doesn't really compel me to step up and learn more. The one on the left, maybe a little bit busy, but let's see what our audience thinks.
We have some hands going up. There'll be time in about 15, 20 minutes for a Q&A, everybody. So save your questions, put them into the chat box, put them into the Q&A, and we'll get back to you in a moment. Those were some examples. As we mentioned, we're not designers, but we do know what we like. Posters are popular for early career researchers, and these are often seen, as we mentioned earlier, as low risk and easier than presenting a slide talk at a conference. But this is not always the case. Your presentation, as we've talked about, should be engaging, should be thought-provoking, and the key here is not the presentation itself. Actually, it's the networking opportunity that surrounds the presentation itself. To get noticed is key to spark a conversation about your research. And with that in mind, let's talk a little bit about putting together a great looking slide presentation. We have some rules for this, and we do recommend the work of our friend David J.P. Phillips. Do check him out. He has some great free downloadables, including this one called How to Avoid Death by PowerPoint, because it is tempting to document your presentation in your talk when actually what you want to do is present your research. Presenting is different to documenting your research. And with that in mind, of course, as I certainly hope we'll do with our presentation today, getting the timing right is all important. We've all been to those conferences. We've all seen people who've not prepared properly, who've given a talk that's way too long for the time slot that they've been given. How long is your slot? What should you include and what should you try to avoid when giving a slide presentation? Very, very important. Timing your presentation is key. And we would also recommend keep it short on the methodology. List the steps that you took to solve your research problem by all means, but we don't need lots of information about the methodology in the presentation itself. What we do want are results. This is where the talk is interesting to an audience in that moment. Your research showed that. This results of this study reveal that. One great trick for doing this is to list 3 things that you found in your research and then make that into a series in your slide presentation and be visual. Use more pictures and less text. And of course, practicing beforehand is something you should do, of course, but that will help you to build confidence. One of the best tips I was ever given when giving presentations was to plan what you're going to say at the start for the first few slides because that helps you get going. That helps you build up your confidence in the presentation, and so it will help you to get started. So learn your talking points, keep your audience in mind, practice alone with colleagues, record and time yourself, and do visit the venue if you can before you give the talk on the day. This is really, really, really important. A bit of a secret tip from me, if you like, if you know a little bit about what you're going to be talking about and where you're going to be talking about it, right, Scott, you can definitely overcome a lot of nerves.
Definitely, as the cliche says, practice makes perfect, but you'll feel better the more times you practice your talk before you attend. And you'll find that each time you practice, you feel just a little bit more confident. And I also recommend recording yourself before the conference. And then you'll be able to identify some of those little nervous habits that we all have. I certainly have them. I used to, and probably still do, kind of smack my lips a lot, which was very audible in a microphone. So in a few minutes,
Ah,
Gareth is going to go through some of those personal habits that we can try to avoid when we're actually giving the talk. We'll get to that in just a minute. So yeah, practice helps a lot, and don't be shy about recording yourself and reviewing and watching critically and yeah, working through those habits.
fantastic. We've talked about planning a little bit. We've talked about preparing and practicing. Let's now talk about some presenting skills and also a little bit about networking. But first, a poll, Scott.
Okay, let's try another poll. How comfortable are you in presenting your work to the public? Let's launch our poll here. Presentation confidence. Do you feel 5 stars, very confident, 4 stars, somewhat confident, 3 stars, neutral, mixed feelings about presenting, 2 stars, somewhat low in confidence, or 1 star, not confident at all in presenting your work? Let's see what people think.
We are getting a few people saying that they're very confident as well as somewhat confident. I was down at the very bottom of this when I was doing my PhD and working at the start of my career, not confident at all, very nervous about giving talks. And it's quite a different skill to give a talk online as well as giving a talk in a conference venue, I often find.
It definitely is. And I think a lot of people were thrown into the experience of presenting online during the pandemic. And it's not comfortable for many people, is it? And I'm very happy to see that we've got a lot of very confident presenters with us tonight.
That is fantastic. Great. And as you know, probably up there on this list of things that people fear the most, public speaking, right, Scott?
Right, but apparently not with our audience today. We've got more than 60% of our group today feels confident or very confident or somewhat confident. And if you're not among that group, if you don't feel confident at all, then please don't feel concerned because for many, many people, public speaking is one of the most fearful things that they experience. This was a recent poll. I think this was in Nature magazine. Apologies for not putting the citation in there, but the top 10 things that people fear most, public speaking ranked #1 above things like snakes and spiders,
Absolutely
thunder, lightning,
unbelievable.
heights, the dentist even. So if you do feel nervous about presenting, you're certainly not alone.
So we've got some tips for overcoming nerves. Of course, being nervous before a presentation is completely normal. You are the expert on your research. Keep that in mind. It was advice that was given to me as well when I was a younger researcher. Nobody else knows more about this than you do, so keep that in mind. That will help you to overcome nerves. And check your slides beforehand and practice beforehand as well. Take on board this piece of advice about starting the presentation, how you will begin crafting a strong opening, a clear and steady pace. This will help you to manage your anxiety. If you've memorized your first few sentences, what you're going to say at the beginning, this helps a lot. And engage with the audience, address the audience. There's a reason we call these presentations presentation aids or slide aids. You are the presentation, not necessarily the slides themselves. And we've got some ideas for you here just quickly about how you can do a lot of this. Speak slowly and loudly, varying your tone and pitch, pausing for emphasis, Don't talk to the screen. This is something that you can't do online, of course, but in a lecture theatre, talking to the screen, talking to the wall is a big mistake. And try to train yourself to cut out those filler words with your presentation style. We do recommend simple, semi-formal language rather than being wordy in the way that you speak about things in a live presentation. Use that simple, semi-formal case, that kind of way of thinking about things that will help you to engage with your audience a lot more. Be a little bit more informal than you might be in an article when writing an article, for example. So, in terms of how you can do this in a non-verbal way, face the audience. Use hand gestures, make eye contact, and keep an upright posture. Right, Scott? Doing this is really, really important to engage with people.
It is, and there's always a balance. And here are some of the nonverbal gestures that you can use. You see us using them all the time. But it's also important, as we'll see in a minute, to not be too distracting with our hand gestures. But these are some of the most common gestures that you can use, facing your audience and using your body language to make people feel comfortable by making eye contact and using some gentle gestures, breathing deeply. My favorite tip, I've probably mentioned this at some of our earlier presentations here, is the rounded body shape technique. And when we're nervous, we tend to elevate our shoulders. We get this square shape. But to look and feel more relaxed, drop your shoulders down, chest out, and you have a more rounded body shape. And the same thing with our hand gestures. The more rounded your hand is, the less sharp it appears. For example, pointing at people, or if you're pointing at the screen or the audience, rounded shapes will make people feel more comfortable and make you feel more comfortable as you're talking.
Great advice. How you can do this with non-verbal gestures. And here's a bit of a summary of that. We won't dwell on this in any great detail, but yeah, I agree. One, two, three. Open hands, welcoming gestures. What did you say, Scott? Give me some more information about what you've just talked about. These kinds of things are great strategies that you can use, right?
Great. And again, that open hand gesture. If you're pointing at figures and you want to zero in on something, it's great to use a pointing finger. But I often see people at the conferences saying, next question, you. Not very comfortable, is it? So open hands are great for pointing at people. You can use your finger for pointing at figures.
Yeah, and talk to the audience. Don't talk to the slides. That's really an important piece of advice. You are the focus. You are the center of attention when giving a presentation, not the slides. So don't hide away when presenting. The audience wants to be engaged. You are the presentation. Take center stage. Your slides are merely visual aids. And if you're using a laser pointer, as we all do sometimes, don't turn your back on the audience. Don't lose engagement and eye contact. Use your body language to enhance those slides. Deliver a more live experience. Don't become a distraction. As Scott mentioned, he used to, smack his lips when doing presentations. I always take everything out of my pockets when I'm giving a presentation in front of a live audience because I found that that could be distracting. Nervous habits like fidgeting, clearing your throat, and you can train yourself to remove those speech patterns like like, and for example. Do not distract your listeners from the key message. Keep regular eye contact. Respond if you can to your audience's reactions. If you see people falling asleep, then maybe change the tempo or the topic. Don't be afraid to engage people in the audience as you give your presentation. Ask them questions and know when to take a break or reinforce information already presented. These skills come with practice, but of course, practicing your presentations is something that you should do anyway. And this is a great one. We always talk about this. If you want to have a message in a presentation that you give, then repeat it 3 times. This is an old trick from, the old days of giving presentations in the old kind of Roman era, the Greek era, this kind of rhetoric kind of era, if you like. The rule of three. Note that our presentation today has 3 sections. You're going to start by telling people what you're going to talk about at the beginning. Then you're going to say it, And then you're going to recap by saying, this is what we talked about in our presentation today. So today I'm going to talk about A, B, and C. Then you talk about A, B, and C in the presentation. And then at the end, recap for the audience. It's a standard tactic. You see it being done in seminars, in sermons by religious leaders, by news readers. It's called the rule of three. You can apply it in your own presentations very, very, very effectively. Engage with your audience, get that feedback. Make sure you do check the room before you give your presentation. Check that everybody can hear and see you. Basic stuff. Because at the end of the day, you're gonna always be networking, promoting yourself, promoting your work before and after the presentation. The key element here is that you are opening a conversation about your research with the audience, with the participants at the conference. That's more important than actually how you give the talk. So don't just be another attendee with so many conferences, slide talks, and networking events. It's important to get noticed. It's important to get mentioned. Stand up and be memorable. Make connections with future collaborators and mentors. Very, very, very important. And just finally, of course, when you give a talk, when you go to a conference, when you present about your work, there's going to be a question and answer session, just like we're going to have in a moment in this webinar today. So time your presentation to allow for questions, but not too many. Repeat the question. If somebody asks you a question, repeat that question for the benefit of the audience so people can understand the question that's just been asked. But this is a great trick because it also gives you time to think. You can also anticipate questions that you're likely to get as a researcher at a conference, prepare answers for them. Don't be afraid to dodge difficult ones. That's a great question, Scott. Thank you for asking it. I feel it deserves a detailed answer. So let's talk later. Let's talk in the coffee break. And also, don't be afraid to say, I don't know, or even push the question back onto the person asking it. Great question, Scott. What do you think?
This is good advice, and we use it here all the time in our talks here with Bentham Science. Sometimes we don't have the answers. Sometimes even Gareth Dyke, with all his experience, doesn't have the answers. So we sometimes deflect questions or defer questions. If we don't have an answer, we often say, that's a wonderful question. Reach out to us, or we'll reach out to you by email and try to get an answer for you. So it's perfectly okay to not have the answer to everything. We don't have the answers to everything. It's okay to say so.
Absolutely, absolutely. But these are tactics, techniques that you can use in your Q&A, which of course brings us to our Q&A today. But first, the rule of three. What have we talked about today, Scott? Let's recap.
All right, Gareth, you walked us through planning your talk or presentation, and then you gave us some tips on preparing and practicing and overcoming nerves and getting ready for your talk. And then finally, you walked us through the act of presenting itself, some tips and tricks for things like verbal and nonverbal gestures, and also engaging with people and networking and making connections with people who attend your poster or talk. Hopefully, the tips that we shared today were helpful for you. It's a very, very broad topic and impossible to cover in just 45 minutes, but hopefully this was useful. And now we do have some questions, Gareth. And by the way, if you're joining us today and you have a question, feel free to either pop it in the Q&A or pop it in the chat. Already getting some great questions. One of our guests was asking about how to present data that's non-numerical. Maybe you have some qualitative data. Maybe you're working in the humanities like me. Maybe you're in psychology or education. You've got some non-numerical data. How do you present that? It's a super great question. I don't have a perfect answer for this question either, but there are lots of ways to visualize or discuss, qualitative data. You can show relationships and you can show flow, patterns, themes. There are all kinds of ways to visualize that. But as Gareth said, just don't make it too text heavy. Even if you have qualitative data, try not to fill your slides with lots of text. Find some way to visualize that And there are some AI tools that can certainly help you. You can perhaps use an AI, figure generator. Just make sure that you cite you're using AI, tell it what you're trying to visually represent, and see if it gives you some ideas. So that was a great question: how to visualize or explain qualitative data that's not numerical. Great question. Okay, some other questions coming in. I see in the Q&A. We had a question also from our guest, Mariam, asking about poster size. This is really important to check beforehand, right? Gareth, you got to get the specs before you join that conference. We so often see poster sizes that aren't to spec. Then they're either too big or too small for the board. And also on that tip slide, it's also good to bring your own things like clips, push pins, Velcro, tape. Have a little utility pack like Batman, this is my push pin, you've got everything there because you might not have access to everything you need at a conference. So bring your utility kit, your Batman utility kit for those conferences so you can attach your poster. So check the slide size, or excuse me, poster slide size carefully. Bring your toolkit with you. You'll be fine.
And I'm
That's a
really
great
keen to emphasize that these are not like a second best option. Like often people, I think, like when they apply to give a presentation at a conference are going for a talk. They want to give a talk, but that's not necessarily the best way to talk about your research. So let's promote these posters. Let's do it and talk about our research. It's a great way to network above.
Great. Yeah, it's great advice. And that's why we spent so much time focusing on those example slides and seeing if they were visually, arresting enough to actually pull people in so that you can make a connection with someone and meet them and hopefully share some of the key points of your work. Another great question here. This is our guest, Irene, asking, is it true that in a big conference, it's permitted to create and send an abstract with a table inside, for example, presentation of demographics data in the table? And Irene says a colleague said that, but she's not sure. Gareth, you have more experience than I have with this kind of data presentation. Is that conventional at a big conference to have to be able to send an abstract with an embedded table?
It depends on the conference. I mean, some conferences are asking only for like a 250, 300 word abstract. Some conferences do give you that opportunity to present more of an extended abstract. It depends. I mean, to answer that question, Irene, I would say, look at the conference guidelines, look at what they're accepting and not accepting. And of course, like if you have that opportunity, I would take it, but maybe not in a table. Is that the best way to really graphically represent what you're trying to get across in an abstract? I mean, if it's demographic data, surely there's a different way that you could present that wasn't just like a table of data.
And I suppose it depends if graphical abstracts or variants are allowed. It really depends on the conference requirements. So it's a great question. I don't know if we have a perfect answer for you, Irene, but if you have any questions, reach out to us. Just reply to our email tomorrow and we'll see if we can
Yeah.
help you.
We have lots of other presentations too. If you have a look at the Bentham Science YouTube channel, you'll see other presentations that we've given in the past on data presentation, data analysis, like making figures, presenting results, and so on. So there's lots to talk about in this particular area.
I'll drop a link in the chat here to the Bentham YouTube channel if anyone's interested. That's a great question, Irene, and hopefully we can get a better answer for you. A great question here from Pradipti, who asks, well, actually, two questions. They're both very challenging. Let's see if we can handle these questions and take our own medicine, Gareth. The first question is, if you had to deliberately break one traditional rule of poster design to create a truly unforgettable poster, which rule would you break and why? Okay.
Wow.
I'm gonna
Wow.
defer to you first, Gareth. I'm gonna use my deferring technique and say, what do you think, Gareth? Any
That's a
experience
great
with this?
it's a great question. Unfortunately, my internet connection went down during the reading out of the questions. I'm just
Oh,
joking.
okay. Well, the
Like, no,
question again.
no, no.
The question again, and this is good technique, is repeating the question. We were preaching that earlier, so I'll take my own medicine. I'll repeat the question. If you had to deliberately break one traditional rule of poster design to create a truly unforgettable poster, Which rule would you break and why? Great question.
Wow, that is a great question. I think I would break the rule that tells me I have to have text on the poster at all. I would just have something like really visually eye-catching that really just starts the conversation with people and then rely on my own you know, conversational networking skills to talk to people about like what else I did in the research, or have copies of the paper, or have other visual aids or data or downloadables available as well for people to take away from the meeting. I would say we're definitely absolutely able to do that these days really easily with AI and other tools that we have at our disposal.
Yeah, great question and great answer. I think I'd probably mention two. The first is to escape the grid. We all know that familiar four-column grid style that looks like it was done in PowerPoint. We've all done it. We all probably will still do it. But what I liked about your example poster, Gareth, showing, the wing structures and the internal structures of wings, I love how that escapes the traditional grid shape. And you had some wonderful flowing and curving shapes that follow the shape of a feather. Very creative. I think it draws the eye in and makes people want to learn more. I also like how you inverted colors. We often see, light colored posters. Um, if you do go to a professional print shop, it is possible to have darker backgrounds with lighter figures and text on them. That can also be very striking. So your poster, Gareth, had two of those things that I would suggest for breaking those traditional rules. You had a dark background and you had a non-grid shape or structure. So I think that would be my answer. It's a great question, Pradeepti. Thank you.
It really is. It really
Fantastic.
is. And if you haven't yet scanned this Bentham QR code or sent it to your friendly local librarian, now's your chance to do that. If you do scan the QR code, you or your institution can get free access for 3 months to all of the Bentham Science content. Really well worth doing. If your institution doesn't yet have access to Bentham Science content, do take a screenshot of this, send it to your librarian, and hopefully we can set up a trial in the not too distant future.
Please do. And thanks to everyone for joining us for this event today. Hopefully, our presentation style was satisfactory today. Gareth, what grade would you give us for our presentation style today?
I don't know. Maybe 6.5, 7 out of 10. I don't
Yeah.
know. We'll see what the feedback is like after the event. It's been a lot of fun doing it,
Yes.
and it always is.
Yes.
Thank you so much for your time today, Scott. Brilliant to see you.
Thank you so much, Gareth, as always, for lending your insights. And thanks to everyone for joining us and making time. We know you're busy, you've got loads to do, so we appreciate you spending an hour of your day with us, and we hope it was useful for you. And above all, of course, thanks to all of our colleagues at Bentham Science for sponsoring this series of events. We'll see you again next month. There's an email coming out to everyone tomorrow, and we'll share with you a certificate of attendance, link to the full video, and also a link to the next presentation that's coming up in May. So we hope to see you at the next event too. So thanks very much, everyone. Thanks to you, Gareth, and thanks to Bentham Science. Have a great day, everyone. Bye.